Hi, everybody. It's Ian Fox here, Guest Safety Officer Lobby Group, and it's Season 2, Episode 1. Today, I'm here with Gary, who's, good news, taking over fairly shortly, and will be the face of Guest Safety Officer Lobby Group for the forthcoming future. But we're also joined, I'm happy to say, by Ronnie Megaughin, who is the head of SIA enforcement. Yes, the Security Industry Authority are here with us today, and they are going to be sharing their knowledge and have questions posed to them by Gary in the interim. Right, first of all, guys, can you quickly introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Gary Twining-Wright. I've been in the security industry for 37 years, as long as the SIA has been going. And I'll hand over to Ronnie.
Okay, thanks, Gary, and good morning, Ian. Ronnie Megaughin, currently Head of Compliance and Inspections and Temporary Head of Criminal Investigations at the SIA. So I've been with SIA since May 2019. Prior to that, I spent 30 years in policing, retiring, having achieved the rank of superintendent.
Not bad, not bad.
Not bad, not bad.
But the whole purpose that Ronnie's here, we had a conversation a week or so ago where I was asking Ronnie to sort of basically tell us what the SIA actually do, because 20 years on, the things that I hear, the questions that get raised to me are exactly the same as they were then. And it just makes me wonder, why haven't we moved on, or have we moved on and we just don't know about it? Or even better, have we just failed to get the message? All right, I'm going to hand over to Gary now. And Gary, fire away.
Cheers, Ian. Good morning, Ronnie, again. It's great to have you on the programme, have the SIA here finally. One of the major questions we get asked all the time is about the training, you know, and we saw the thing on Channel 4 or the BBC, what it was. Well, what goes on there, and why does it take so long for this to go through?
Okay, well, let's just deal with the whole governance of the training provision in the first instance. So the training is outsourced. As you guys know, the audience will hopefully know, the standards for training are set by the SIA. So that's part of, well, it's one of our statutory functions under the legislation, is to set those standards. So the standards are set by the SIA, but the provision of that training is outsourced. So in essence, you've got that pyramid that sits aside from the SIA, which has Ofqual at the top of it, and the Scottish qualifications body in Scotland. Below that, you've got awarding organisations, and then a whole array of different training providers below that. So in terms of the regulatory remit, that sits effectively with Ofqual at the top of that pyramid. That said, and I think this is a really important point, is the SIA don't take the position that we've got no responsibility in terms of what came to the fore as a consequence of the Filing 4 broadcast. And I think actually, in fairness, we were very responsive almost immediately on the back of that. And we've actually put in place a criminal investigation, which we're currently progressing, and I can't say any more detail in relation to that. But we've got a criminal investigation which we're progressing in relation to one set of circumstances that arose from that. Ian asked me the other day, so historically though, there's always been quite a slow kind of response in relation to these matters arising. And yeah, let's be entirely candid here. This is not the first time that reports of this nature have surfaced. But I do think it's a really good indication of the progressive thinking and approach that currently exists within the SIA, that we've actually responded incredibly quickly on this occasion to what's been highlighted. So in answer to your question, why does it take so long? Well, I think on this occasion, Gary, it actually hasn't taken so long. I do think we're in a position now, you know, we've got a public release out last week. which I reposted onto LinkedIn to afford an audience to see it. It was done on the .gov.uk website. But yeah, we've worked hard with the warden organisations for the centres and Ofqual, so that we have clarity and clear lines in terms of each individual organisational role within that.
Thanks, Ronnie. Just look at that a little bit deeper. I mean, whereas, I mean, you said you've got a criminal investigation going through. What's Ofqual's point on this thing? As I understand, they have to investigate as well before you guys. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Ofqual, they're ultimately their responsibility is about the delivery of training, but they very much focus around about the end user of that, so that the learners within that environment. Our criminal investigation is looking at the potential for any fraud to have happened within it. That's very much our remit, and we've agreed that we'll take on that criminal investigation.
Okay, so frankly, when you get hold of this stuff, so I mean, who looks at it first? Because as I am aware that Ofqual look at it. I mean, you guys are there. It's been reported to you people. Do you have to Ofqual, and then will Ofqual start the investigation, or?
It really depends on, I mean, ultimately Ofqual have primacy in terms of what happens within their regulatory landscape and within their regulatory remit. But we also have a test, which is that we will give due consideration to anything that has a negative impact on the SIA or has a negative impact on the private security industry from a reputational perspective. And that pretty much enables us to look at any circumstances and say, do we have a role to play in this? And then you're absolutely right. It's an agreed position thereafter. So we don't work in isolation. We don't take decisions in isolation. Ofqual are the regulators within that training environment. So yeah, we'd always work with the regulator who has primacy in any particular circumstance. You know, we do it in the sports world. We do it with SGSA as well. SGSA have the regulatory role. Local authorities have a regulatory role in many circumstances. And we don't step out with the boundaries of our remit, but we will work closely with those other organisations or those bodies to ensure that what happens is the issues that are raised are addressed. And as I said, I think this time round, this is not the first occasion where we've taken criminal prosecutions actually in relation. This is an investigation at this stage, but in the past we have had prosecutions in relation to training criminality. So it's not the first time that the SIA has responded, but I think this one came with a particularly high profile because it came as a consequence of a BBC File 4 broadcast.
All right. So at the end of the day, did the SIA have the final say on this?
In relation to our criminal investigation, so the way it works in the SIA is within England and Wales, we do our own prosecutions. So the criminal investigation will be conducted. There'll then be a decision based on the evidence gathered as to whether the threshold is met for sufficiency and whether it's in the public interest. If that's the case, then in all criminal investigations that meet the threshold, then we would consider going for a public prosecution at that point in time. But that's a bit further down the road just now, Gary. And I don't want to go into the detail of the investigation because it's a live criminal investigation.
Yeah, I fully appreciate that. I'm looking at it as a more broadband thing.
Gary,
yeah.
Can I just ask a question here that's just something that's come to mind? So I apologise if you were going to ask this. It's just, you just mentioned so many different agencies there that you have to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah. At what point does public safety become the major issue? Because obviously the area that we all work in, private security industry, we're there to support and promote public safety. When does that take precedence?
I think it's a consideration for all, Ian. I don't think there's any regulatory body that operates in the public arena that doesn't, and this is very much dependent on the circumstances, but doesn't give due consideration to potential public safety implications with any set of circumstances. I mean, clearly in the training environment, I made reference to SGSA, local authorities. That's in the sports world. It's just to give you an example of the other settings in which we work with regulatory bodies. in the training environment, is public safety the paramount consideration for Ofqual? You need to ask Ofqual whether it's their paramount consideration. But I think in this set of circumstances, where you potentially have a situation where individuals have not undertaken, potentially not undertaken, the full syllabus for the licence linked qualification training, then there's a question mark. On that broadcast, I was also interviewed by the BBC team, and I made the point that licence linked qualification training is a fundamental, it's a foundation stone in terms of the ability of individuals to carry out the role of a security operative. Now, doesn't matter what setting you go to in the world. Some people are better than others in terms of delivering a service. Some businesses are better than others. But what we have in licence linked qualification training is that foundation. So everybody who leaves that training has the basic knowledge and the skills and that level of competency, and that allows them to then apply for the licence. Anything less than that significantly undermines public safety. So to try to close the loop on that one, Ian, if you were sitting in a body that was looking at that training provision and there was allegations that that training wasn't being delivered, I think irrespective of whether you were the awarding organisation or you were Ofqual, you would need to give due consideration to the implications of that. I think that would be a fair position. I think that would be a position that the vast majority of lay people would expect, and I think the general public would view it in that context and with that perspective as well.
That covers that quite neatly. Thanks for that, Ronnie. I appreciate that. One of the other things which I get thrown at, just slightly going off grid, because we've spoken about that and we understand that. The SIA is a regulating body. Could you sort of delve into that more deeper? You know, because a lot of people don't understand what a regulating body, what the SIA as a regulating body is.
Yeah. So yeah, very much. In brief, Gary, I could consume your entire broadcast trying to explain that. So I will keep it brief. So yeah, what is our role? Our role is our purpose is to protect the public through effective regulation. So in effect, if we regulate the private security industry effectively, then the public should be safeguarded as a consequence of that. And there's a number of different statutory functions we have. One of them is about setting those individual standards that I mentioned earlier on. The other is to conduct inspections and to monitor the activities of security businesses in the private security industry, to make recommendations to the Home Office in relation to any potential amendments or changes to the regulatory regime or to the legislation. But we only regulate individuals. So our remit is only in relation to individuals within the UK. Despite, as you know, and both you and Ian have rehearsed previously on your broadcast, the subject of business licensing. And I'm happy to talk a bit more in detail around about that if you want. But yeah, so we regulate individuals. But also remember that those who are operating businesses, who are delivering a service under contract, and that's the important part of it, they require to be licensed as well, right through to board level. So, you know, we have people who are over in other parts of the world who are sitting on boards for very large organizations. They require to be at least have a non-frontline license as well, because they're not active in the supervision and management of frontline. But yeah, so that's our role, Gary. We're over 400,000 licensed individuals now. I think we're at just about maybe on the cusp of 430,000. I think the figures fluctuate, not dramatically, but it has been a rise since COVID, actually, since people started to go back to work. So,
thank you, Ronnie, for that. One of the other biggest things which always get thrown at is legislation. I mean, we're 20 years into the SIA now, and things have moved on, things have changed, and you know, I feel, I know Ian does, and quite a few of us, we feel this legislation needs to be changed. Can it be changed? How are your hands tied not to be changed yet? Is that something that could be that?
Well, it's interesting, Gary, that one of the statutory functions we have is to make recommendations for potential change based on our observations as the regulatory body. So we have a sponsorship unit. We're an arm's length body. We have a sponsorship unit that sits within the Home Office. Ultimately, we're answerable to the Home Secretary through the Safeguarding and Victims Minister. And there is an arrangement for the devolved administrations in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well, UK-wide and represented in all of those seats of government. Ultimately, the decision on whether legislation gets changed is one for parliamentarians. It's one for the government to do. We can only advise, and I'll take you back to the scenario for the Manchester Arena recommendations. So we were charged by the chair, jointly charged by the chair of the inquiry with MR7 and MR8. First one to remove the in-house exemption and bring people in-house back into the regulatory landscape. And the second one to introduce, for all intents and purposes, to introduce business licensing. Not quite termed that way in the recommendation, but certainly that was the intention. And we created two, I think, very compelling business cases for both. We've been very public, the SIA has been very public in terms of its position on that. Michelle Russell, our CEO, wrote to the inquiry and updated them in terms of the SIA position. But ultimately, that's not a decision that we can make happen. All we can do is try and influence the decision makers, and that's what we tried to do on this occasion.
I feel it's really important for everyone out there to understand just what Michelle did at the Manchester Arena inquiry. The letter that she sent was read out word for word by Sir John Saunders to Sean Hipgrave, who was sat there, and I can tell you he wasn't a happy bunny. The bottom line is she made it absolutely clear that the SIA wanted business licensing to come in, and that they see it as being a vital tool in their ongoing drive to raise standards and improve public safety. And when Sir John heard that it didn't look like it was going to go through, he told Sean Hipgrave to go back and advise his minister to change their mind. I know you can't think, I just thought it was for everyone else that they need to fully understand what happened there.
Yeah, I think listen, you've articulated that very well, Ian. It's not my place to comment on what happened post submission of those business cases. But you're right. You've covered that well. I don't think that element of the Manchester Arena inquiry necessarily had as wide an audience as perhaps it merited, because I do think it was an important point, an important phase within the inquiry. Was that revisiting of the monitored recommendations. But you're absolutely right. The inquiry solicitor read in its entirety Michelle Russell, my CEO's representation to the inquiry. So it's not in any doubt. I think for anybody who listened to that or who has had sight of that document, what the SIA's position is, and that hasn't changed. So that's still a position the SIA maintain. But just on a general point, Gary, in relation to the point you make, which is, the legislation now is 20 plus years. If you look at the white paper that preceded the introduction of the legislation, and you look at the drivers within that for why regulation was sought at that time, it was predominantly around about ridding the industry of criminality. And therefore producing a much safer environment or a much safer community to protect the public. You're absolutely right. If you just look at the world, and looking back at my policing days, so I retired in 2019. So I was 19 years on from effectively the introduction of the creation of that legislation. The world had changed dramatically in that 19 years. The threats that are faced through criminality are hugely different. And the security industry it is an integral part of security in this country. And the threats to the industry are different, and the threats that evolve within the industry are different. You know, that very obvious, and I call it obvious because a lot of it was very obvious, very brutish, yeah, unsophisticated criminality that existed. That's been refined. It's very different. You know, those from an organised perspective who are interested in pursuing their criminality through business have become more adept at achieving that. So we're facing different issues today, Gary, than we were back then. It isn't just about legislation. If you look at what powers the SIA have within that legislation, those are very, very limited as well. Very limited.
Well, you just that's good. But you're coming on to my next question about the powers you actually have. I mean, and what limitations and what can you actually do as the regulator?
Yeah. So if you, I mean, so what we can do is we can conduct criminal investigations. So and we've got proceeds of crime legislation which allows us to pursue POCA seizures, etc. So we can realise some material benefit coming out of some of those prosecutions. Now, not everyone is applicable for POCA, but we've had successes over the piece, and those who have exploited the industry for criminal gain have ended up paying money back through POCA. So that's one part of it. But in terms of our day-to-day powers, so under Section 19, we can require a regulated person to provide us with certain information that we request. So that could be staffing lists, could be banking details, could be a history of contracts, a whole array of things relative to their business or to the individual. And we can enter premises of a regulated person. But for intents and purposes, when you look at the interpretation of that, that means we can enter effectively the premises of a security business. We have no entitlement in law to enter a venue. So we need to be invited in to the places we go. When we go to do an inspection of a festival, we have to work very hard with the organizer and other partners prior to that to actually be accredited to actually go in and carry out an inspection. So there's a challenge there from my side of the business in that you're almost arriving announced on the vast majority of occasions. The only time that isn't happening is when we do the nighttime stuff. So you've got clearly door supervisors who are on the periphery of those licensed premises. So they're there as the interface, you know, the first receiving part for the public. Then they don't know we're coming, but very quickly the message gets passed around at the SIA or in that locale or in that vicinity. We you know, beyond that, we're actually very limited. I know that might sound peculiar, and for those who know about what powers can be available to law enforcement organisations, we're not a law enforcement organisation, we're a regulatory body. But yes, would we want more? I think what I said is really important, that the industry has changed and the threats have changed. You look at the industry now, and there's a significant portion of it operates on the kind of social media, the WhatsApp world. And I know you guys have picked up on this previously as well. So people register in a WhatsApp group, and then you have these agents who effectively act as a conduit and connect, you know, security operative A with a company or a contract or a subcontract that's looking for that resource. We have no ability to monitor on a regular basis those activities online. That would be good in this day and age. That would be exceptionally good, because you need to be matched to the environment you're regulating. And I think that's what's happened. The world has moved on. The industry dynamics have changed. The operating model for the security industry in the UK is different to what it was, you know, late 90s coming into the introduction of the legislation.
Thanks for that, Ronnie. I know we're running out of time now, so I mean, I've got a list of questions which is endless to ask you.
I'm happy to come back, Gary. We can do not version 2, but phase 2 at some point. I don't have a problem with that at all.
That'd be great. Have you got anything you want to say on this, Ian?
Yeah, gosh, got so many questions. It's unbelievable. You know, the one that I'm gonna raise is obviously with regards to Martin's Law.
Yeah.
That's one that you know,
Do you want
because
to go for that one, Ian? Do you just want
gosh, mate, I'm all for this.
I was avoiding that one, Ian.
All my sources are telling me that it is looking very much like the SIA is going to wind up being the national regulator for this, on the basis that realistically the geographical spread, the knowledge, although that will be contested in terms of CT counterterrorism knowledge, will be contested to a degree that they would appear to be the best placed body to take that forward.
So the first thing I'd say to you is, if you're paying your sources, keep your money in your pocket.
Yeah.
The second thing I'd say to you is that there's only one body of people who genuinely know who the regulator or the regulatory body may be, and that's those who are developing the legislation within Homeland Security, and they're the only people who know. I can't say any more than that. They are genuinely the only people who know.
Oh, well, you know, we'll see. I'll see if I win my tenner or not. By the way, folks, I have bet my tenner that I'm right.
Just for your point there, my sources said they're not.
So there you go. So already there's conflicting views within the broadcasting team. And I've said to you already, Mr. Fox, a Scotsman and his money, okay, are not easily parted.
We'll see. We'll see about that. I just the final thing that I'd like to ask on this, because this is one of the things that's sort of drove this whole thing, is it's about agency.
Yeah.
We're talking about what the regulator does.
Yeah.
We talk about what Ofqual does.
Yeah.
We talk about failures in training provision, etc., awarded organizations, all of that, business licensing. But at the end of the day, don't the suppliers have agency? Are they not able to say, I am the arbiter of who is qualified and suitable to work for my organization or at venues to which I supply? Are they not able to turn around and say, we will only use X training providers whom we know are thing, or we will only use X awarding organization that meet the standards that we as a sector or as an organization feel are appropriate? The SIA couldn't do anything about that, could they?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know what the governance is around about the identification and the agreement with awarding organisations. My assumption is, but it's another part of the SIA business. You need to get Tony on here to discuss that with you. My assumption is that, I mean, it's not something that isn't done without our approval. I think if we had questions, if we had serious questions and concerns from a public safety perspective around about the operation of any element within that dynamic that sits and provides training, I think we would make representation in relation to that, Ian. These are contracts at the end of the day. So you're absolutely right. There is another point, which is about, private security industry businesses employ individuals as well.
Yeah.
The issue there is that, as I said, we are the foundation stone. So the provision of a license is effectively your accreditation to operate within the industry. And that's why it needs to be absolutely beyond reproach, that it needs to have integrity running right through it. Because public trust and confidence, which is incredibly important to the SIA, can only be met if the public genuinely have that confidence in all elements that come together in considering the suitability of an individual to have a license. And I've always said that, you know, I experienced this back in the day when I worked in the Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency, and it was about organised crime groups who had business interests, and they were in regulated sectors, licensed, private hire, etc. And the issue is that you, to a degree, legitimise as soon as you license or accredit. The problem for us is that, you look at filing for, so if at the end of the day, the filing for, you know, allegations were all correct, there were some people who didn't undertake the license-like qualification training in its entirety. As I said to you before, that undermines their ability. It undermines public safety, but it questions their ability to do the role of a security operative. Wherever that exists, then it's an issue, and it's an issue that the SIA certainly won't put its head in the sand for, and the SIA won't balk at the challenge of dealing and addressing. As I said, I think the swiftness in which we move this time, that will be replicated should similar circumstances arise. And you know, my last bit is, if people do have genuine concerns around about any aspects of either licensing, the deployment, or the training of individuals, then they can report it through our portal on our website, and that stuff is action. We've got a full intelligence unit who assess and develop all items that come in, and then decide on what action's best taken. So
there's a lot more now, isn't there, than there were a year or so ago?
Yeah, there is here, and we used to have a defining line or a dividing line in the SIA in relation to training criminality and then training malpractice. So clocks in the wrong place in walls, all that sorts of stuff. That's all for the training world. Those things to be addressed within there. But once you get into where there's evidence or a suspicion of criminality, and it goes back to one of the early questions Gary asked me, the SIA will look at that and decide whether it's appropriate for us to investigate that from a criminal perspective and potentially look at a prosecution. Because that's an exceptionally good deterrent for those who wish to circumvent rules. Ultimately it is. And as I said, the fact we have pocket powers, wherever you're dealing with criminality, if you can impact on the money, then that has a significant deterrent effect. It really does.
Thanks, Ronnie. As I say, I think we've run out of time on this one, but there's literally, I've got a list of questions I can go on all day, fire at you. But
listen, Dallas ran for years, Gary. It ran for season after season. I'm hopefully, touch wood, not going to disappear off the face of the earth after this recording. So I'm happy to come back, and I'm happy to answer questions. I think it's really important, and this is a view that's shared by many within the SIA. I think it's really important that we are an organisation that's happy to answer questions in the public domain, that's happy to put faces and real people behind what a regulatory body looks like. I think that's really important. You know, our chair and Heather Bailey, our CEO and Michelle, Paul Fullwood, my director, all very visible. You'll see a lot more, I think, now of us than you probably did previously. It's really critically important that you have an opportunity to ask us as the regulator questions, and that the industry has an opportunity to ask us questions as the regulator. That's only sensible. And actually, that forging those good relations is critically important in that striving what I said, you know, public safety, public protection, and that public trust and confidence that needs to be present for us to have successfully achieved our role as a regulator.
That is great to see, and that's very it's great to hear, because over the years, you know, it has been very hard to speak to people like yourself. There hasn't been a face of the SIA. It's always been very much you've hidden away. I mean, you know, just a side point. I mean, even the call centre, when you took the call centre away, you took yourselves away from the people on the ground that wanted to speak to you. But it's great to have you on the show, and it's great to see you guys actually coming out and starting to speak to the people on the ground and putting this forward now.
And what I would say is, I mean, we've increased our inspection footprint by about 250% over the last 12 months. That's a massive undertaking. So we've jumped by thousands of license checks, and they're not just checks. Every one is an engagement with people working in the industry, and I have to say that's been incredibly well received, and that will continue to grow, and that's right across the UK. We can't be everywhere all the time, but where there's risk or intelligence leads us to a location, we will now invariably strive to be there and address whatever those issues or concerns are.
That is great, because there should be it should be us and them. It really should, we should be working hand in hand. You give us the license, you regulate us, we do the job, and we should be able to come to you and go, guys, this is not right here. These people aren't right, and we should be able to get that feedback. Which is you being here today has opened so many doors.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I would re-emphasise that position, Gary. Anybody who does have concerns about the operation of the industry or individuals within it, they can report it on the portal on our website, and I'd encourage people to do that, because the only way that we can genuinely address concerns is if we're getting that feed coming into us. Otherwise, all it is just anecdote, which comes up and invariably comes up weeks or months after the event, saying, why do you not do something? Well, actually, it's very difficult to do something about something you're unaware of. It really is. And we are an intelligence-led organisation. It needs to come in at that point, be assessed, a bit of analysis done around about it, a bit of development, and then for the field teams, either within compliance inspections, within criminal investigations, or now within business standards or individual standards, to go out and do it. I will make the point about the training centres, that there's been a huge upturn in terms of unannounced visits to the training centres as well, by those who work in individual standards. So, this is an all fronts approach by the SIA. This is clearly a rise in our visibility, but not just to be visible, but actually to have impact. And we look inward, we reflect on all of that activity and say, well, actually, what impact are we making here? What difference is coming as a consequence of that change in approach? We're very much led by Heather Bailey and Michelle Russell in terms of slightly changing that axis from predominantly an organisation. The focus very much on getting the licensing right. That's absolutely necessary, because people need to have the license in quick time, so they can go out there and they can work. Absolutely, that's right. But now there's a slight change in that. We had an uplift in resources on our side of the business, and that was to address many of those issues that required to be addressed. And some of those are through the visibility and the compliance and the criminal work that we're doing.
Great. Thank you, Ronnie. Ian, any final thoughts?
Well, no, it is just fantastic, Ronnie, to have you out here. And as I say, Michelle's always welcome, as is Paul, as is any member of the senior team, because it is vital. One of the things that I remember most of all from when I ran National Door Watch, between 2009, 10, 11, is Bill Butler, who was the CEO at that. He was out, he visited, he came out and, met door supervisors and it made a massive difference, to the way the SIA was able to, or perceived to communicate that there was actually a desire to speak to. So all for it, all for it. Thank you.
I'm only too happy, obviously when availability permits, to come and be part of the show. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
We'll definitely get that arranged, and I'll have a part two with Ronnie.
Yeah, no problem, Gary. Look forward to it already. Look forward to it.
Great stuff, Ronnie. On those final notes, I'm going to hand over to you in to depart today.
It's today great. It's just been fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I'm obviously, it's the end of the day, end of the show. Peace out.